The heat shimmered above the runway as Elise Carter stepped out of the transport van, the air smelling of jet fuel and sun-baked metal. Her boots crunched on the gravel, each step too soft for someone who moved like a ghost trying not to wake the dead. A SEAL leaning against a cargo crate smirked and asked, "Hey, what's your rank?" as if daring her to matter. Before she could answer, the roar of engines cut through the air and a military jet rolled to a stop behind her. Four generals stepped out in perfect formation, uniforms crisp, expressions carved from stone. They lifted their hands and saluted her first, silence snapping over the tarmac like a trap. Elise froze, breath catching, pulse pounding in her throat like a warning drum. One general whispered, "Ma'am, we thought you were dead," voice trembling more than he meant. Hayes, the SEAL, blinked hard, confusion tightening his jaw, and Elise whispered back, "You're mistaking me for someone else, you have to be." The general lifted a clipboard with a redacted folder stamped Operation Seraphim in bleeding red ink. Elise's fingers twitched toward the scar under her collarbone, instinctive, as if the name burned her skin. The wind carried the smell of hot asphalt and distant ocean, sharp as memory slicing in. She shook her head, voice cracking despite her effort to steady it. "I'm not who you think," she murmured, but the tremor in her breath said otherwise. The generals exchanged looks, fear, recognition, duty all tangled together. Hayes watched her closely, squinting as if her face held answers he wasn't ready to see. Her jaw tightened like she was holding back a scream that had lived in her for years. She took one step back, then another, hands curling into fists she didn't remember making. The air grew heavy, charged with something old, wrong, and very alive. Elise turned sharply, duffel hitting her hip as she tried to walk away, heartbeat thundering in her ears. The tarmac alarms shrieked to life, red lights strobing across her face like slices of danger. Military police surged from every direction, boots hammering the ground in synchronized urgency. Hayes muttered, "What the hell is going on?" But no one answered him. Elise's breath hedged. Her muscles cold, fight or flight flickering violently through her body. The smell of ozone mixed with dust as radios crackled to life across the field. She felt the moment the soldiers recognized her, shoulders tensing, eyes widening, fear blooming. Gravel shifted under her boots as she backed toward the hangar shadows. Her mind flashed jungle heat, gunfire, a scream swallowed by the night. She knew this feeling, the past trying to drag her back. A voice on the radio barked, "Confirm identity. If she's the asset, secure immediately." Elise's chest tightened. The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. She whispered, "Asset," as if tasting the word revealed poison on her tongue. Hayes stepped closer, not laughing now, just watching her shake despite herself. The generals tried to approach, but MPS blocked their path, orders outranking their shock. The wind picked up, whipping Elise's hair across her face like frantic brushstrokes. The smell of burning rubber drifted from somewhere far, too much like another fire long ago. Her throat closed, breaths turning shallow, edges of vision dimming. She tried to swallow, but the air felt thick, heavy with truths she wasn't ready to face. Her feet shifted, ready to run though she didn't know where. The MPS tightened in their circle, boots clacking, radios echoing the same urgent order. Elise backed toward a maintenance cart, fingers brushing cold steel, grounding her. Hayes raised both hands, palms up, voice low. "Hey, slow down, talk to me." But Elise wasn't hearing him, she was hearing ghosts whispering through memory. She scanned faces, fearful, wary, confused, none offering the escape she craved. Her heartbeat throbbed in her wrists, her throat, her temples, everywhere but calm. The sky dimmed behind cloud cover, light dying like a shutter closing. Static hissed through a nearby radio, sharp enough to sting her ears. Then a final voice broke through, colder than the others, certain and merciless. "Repeat. If she's the asset, secure immediately." And Elise whispered, trembling, "Asset? What are they talking about?" Elise sprinted as the MPS closed in, breath slicing through her chest like cold steel in the hot air. Her boots hammered the tarmac, rhythm sharp, precise for someone retired. She dropped under a swinging baton, rolled, and sprang up fluidly, instincts betraying secrets she'd buried. Gravel scraped her palms, smell of dust and rubber hitting her senses as she pivoted behind a fuel truck. A shout echoed orders, confusion, fear, none of it reaching her fully through the adrenaline haze. Her shoulder brushed metal, sparks of memory hitting like shrapnel in her mind. Her hand flew to the scar beneath her collarbone, fingertips trembling against the raised skin. Flashes of jungle heat, burning foliage, shadows closing in. She swallowed hard, forcing them down. She whispered, "Not now," voice thin, cracking at the edges. But her legs kept running, as if outrunning ghosts she couldn't face. Hayes followed at a distance, boots pounding but never closing the gap, eyes narrowed in concern. He didn't yell at her to stop. He didn't reach for restraint. Instinct told him restraint wasn't what she needed. Her movements weren't criminal, they were terrified, desperate, practiced in pain. He slowed when he saw her press a hand against her chest, breath stuttering like a broken engine. Wine whipped across the hangar, carrying grit and the metallic scent of old machinery. As she turned a corner, something swung from her bag, a small metallic tag, dull but unmistakable. Hayes caught the glint and stopped cold, eyes widening as realization brewed. Before he could study, Elise yanked the tag back into the bag with frantic haste. His jaw clenched, pieces shifting inside his mind, where questions grew sharp teeth. "Why hide that?" he muttered, pulse rising not from threat, but from curiosity digging deeper. He caught up to her near a maintenance bay, breath steadier than hers, though tension clung to his shoulders. She leaned against a crate, sweat tracking down her temple, breath uneven and raw. Fragments of the past swirled around her like smoke she couldn't clear. Hayes approached slowly, hands open, voice soft but edged with truth-seeking. "You move like someone trained for more than standard ops," he said, trying not to provoke. Elise didn't answer, just stared at her shaking hands as if they betrayed her. Through halting breaths she whispered, "I left the Navy for a reason. A whole team. Gone." The words scraped out of her like they hurt coming into the air. Her eyes flicked away, unable to meet his guilt swallowing her whole. Hayes felt his stomach drop. This wasn't guilt of failure, this was guilt of survival. A soft whine echoed from the shadows of the hangar, low, trembling, familiar in a way Elise couldn't place. A retired K-9 stepped forward, fur graying, one leg stiff with an old injury, eyes sharp despite the limp. Coda sniffed the air, ears twitching, then limped straight toward Elise with certainty, not hesitation. She stiffened, breath catching as the dog pressed his head against her knee as if claiming her. Hayes blinked. Stunned dogs didn't act like that with strangers, not traumatized. K-9 South. Elise's fingers hovered midair before finally landing gently on the dog's head. Her throat tightened as she felt warmth under her palm, something cracking open inside her. The smell of dog fur, dust, and motor oil wrapped around her like a memory long denied. She sank to one knee, shoulders trembling, eyes burning with something close to grief. Hayes watched, realization forming like storm clouds behind his eyes. Elise leaned closer, forehead brushing Coda's fur, voice shaking. "I know you. But how?" she whispered, words fragile as glass. Her breaths grew uneven, memories clawing their way back from the dark. Coda nudged her chest, nose pressing exactly against the scar she'd been trying to hide. Her pupils blew wide, shock rippling through her like a current. Hayes stiffened, a chill running through him as pieces started falling into place. He stepped closer, gravel crunching beneath his boots, voice low but sharp. "Elise, what do you mean you weren't supposed to survive?" She froze, every muscle locking, breath trapped in her chest. And Hayes asked the question that shattered the air. Survive what exactly? Hayes found her tucked between crates in a dim supply shed, dust swirling in shafts of light cutting through warped metal panels. Elise jerked upright the moment he stepped in, fingers wrapping around a heavy wrench like an extension of her bones. Her stance shifted, feet planted, shoulders square, breath shallow as if she expected betrayal from every corner. Hayes lifted his hands, palms open, tension sharp enough to slice the stale air. "Easy," he whispered, but the tremor in her knuckles said nothing about this moment was easy. The shed groaned under a passing gust, shadows stretching across her face like war paint. For a second, they were statues, predator and survivor, neither willing to blink first. Then Hayes reached slowly into his jacket, movement deliberate, telegraphed. Elise tightened her grip, ready to strike. But he didn't pull a weapon, he pulled a photograph. He stepped forward just enough for the light to catch it, for generals saluting her on the tarmac. Their faces were clear, her figure was unmistakable. The moment was impossible to deny. Elise's breath hitched, wrench lowering a fraction, as she stared at herself frozen in a truth she refused to touch. "Why would they salute you?" Hayes asked quietly, voice edged with something like awe. Elise swallowed, throat tight, memories scraping against her ribs like broken glass. "I'm nobody," she muttered, but the photo in his hand disagreed violently. Hayes slipped another paper from his pocket, a fragment of a classified mission debrief. At the top, Operator Seraphim. Beneath it, a blurred face nearly identical to hers. She shook her head, denial cracking under the weight of evidence. "That wasn't me," she whispered, but even she didn't sound convinced. Hayes stepped closer, studying her like a cipher he shouldn't be able to read. "You led an off-books unit," he said, voice low, controlled, "a unit they erased including you." Elise backed up until her spine hit cold metal, wrench clattering from her hand as truth pried her open. Her breathing trembled, every inhale a fight against memories she'd stitched shut years ago. "I didn't lead anything," she insisted, words brittle. "I barely survived." Hayes crouched, lifting the wrench but setting it aside, instead of using it. He wasn't a threat, he was a mirror she didn't want to look into. The silence between them thickened, shaped by distrust and something reluctant, fragile. Coda limped into the shed, settling beside Hayes with a soft whine. Elise stared at the dog, confusion flickering, loyalty shifting in ways she didn't understand. Hayes rested a hand on Coda's fur, eyes never leaving her. "Why are they after you now?" he asked, tone sharper, urgency threading through the stale air. Elise's lips parted, but no sound came out at first, only fear. Then, barely audible, "Because I know something I shouldn't." Her voice fractured on the last word, shame twisting her features. Hayes leaned in, hearing the unspoken weight behind it. "That you still won't tell me," he said. Not accusing, just stating the truth. She kept dodging. Her jaw tightened, a shield snapping back into place. She stared at the exit, calculating, agonizing. Running meant dying alone, staying meant trusting him. Finally, she pushed off the wall, shoulders trembling but decision made in her eyes. "Fine," she said, voice steadying, "I'll tell you everything." A beat of silence, heavy, monumental, hung between them, but not here. As if summoned by her words, alarms erupted across the base, shrill and merciless. Red lights began flashing through the cracks of the shed walls. Hayes' head snapped toward the sound, hand instinctively on his belt. Elise grabbed her bag, grip white-knuckled, eyes wide. A metallic voice boomed over loudspeakers, "Unauthorized personnel approaching." Hayes turned to Elise, breath sharp. "They found us." The alarms still wailed in the distance as Elise and Hayes slipped into an abandoned maintenance tunnel, concrete walls sweating with old moisture. Their footsteps echoed softly, Coda padding behind them like a silent guardian, ears twitching at every distant clang. Dim emergency lights flickered overhead, casting their shadows long and distorted across the corridor. Hayes checked behind them twice, jaw tense, but Elise moved ahead with wary precision. When they reached a dead end, she spotted an old ventilation shaft halfway up the wall. "Boost me," she whispered, voice taut but steady. Hayes interlaced his fingers, lifting her with surprising gentleness. She climbed, metal groaning under her weight, then reached down. Her grip found his wrist firm, deliberate as she hauled him up beside her. The moment was small, but trust slid quietly into the space between them. They crawled through the narrow duct until it opened into a dark service room layered in dust. Elise sank against a wall, breathing hard, shoulders finally slumping. Hayes watched her, noticing the fatigue etched deep under her eyes. "The original commander wasn't supposed to die," she murmured suddenly, voice brittle. Hayes blinked, surprised by the unprompted confession. "I wasn't meant to lead Seraphim. I was the replacement, a last-minute name on a page." For the first time, her voice wasn't guarded, it was grieving. Hayes sat across from her, elbows on his knees, shadows softening his expression. "My brother died around that time," he said quietly. "Classified mission, no details released." Elise's breath hitched, the timeline clicking together like a lock turning. Silence stretched heavy, but no longer hostile. The air smelled of old oil, rust, and the faint musk of Coda's fur. Elise rubbed her face with trembling hands, exhaustion making her briefly human. "I haven't slept properly in a year," she admitted, voice barely a breath. Hayes swallowed, something softening in his gaze. Coda nudged her leg, then curled against her hip, tail thumping once as if claiming her. Elise exhaled shakily, hand falling onto the dog's fur. For the first time, her fingers didn't tremble. Hayes watched them woman and dog bonding over wounds neither could voice. It was the first quiet moment since the chaos began. A glint in the corner caught Elise's attention. She stood slowly, moving toward a line of dusty crates stamped with faded military insignia. Hayes joined her, prying one open with a creak that echoed down the tunnel. Inside lay old gear patches, broken radios, helmets marked with names she recognized instantly. Her team, her past, her ghosts. Elise's breath cracked, a faint smile tugging at her lips despite the ache. "There's stuff. It's all here," she whispered, all softening the edges of her fear. For a heartbeat, hope flickered delicate but real. Hayes watched her smile, the first he'd seen, and he didn't dare break it. Then Elise's hand froze over a folded, blood-stained map wedged beneath a gear satchel. Her fingers trembled, lifting it as if it might shatter. Names, routes, and coded markings crisscrossed the page, familiar, damning. Hayes leaned closer, but Elise's eyes were already whitening with dread. "This," she breathed, voice dropping to a shaky whisper. She stared at the map as memories aligned into something terrifyingly clear. "This wasn't an accident," her voice echoed through the tunnel like a verdict. Coda growled softly, sensing the shift in the air. And Hayes felt the temperature drop as the truth began to surface. Elise knelt on the cold concrete, spreading the blood-stained map across the tunnel floor, hands trembling as she smoothed it flat. The marking circles, arrows, coded notations didn't point to enemy interference at all. They pointed inward. Hayes crouched beside her, eyes narrowing as he traced a route marked with sharp red strokes. "These aren't ambush patterns," he murmured. "They're choke points, planned ones." Elise swallowed, breath catching as she followed the same path. "Someone hurted us," she whispered, "right where they wanted us." Her chest tightened with realization her team hadn't been outmatched. They'd been sacrificed. The tunnel hummed faintly with distant alarms, a reminder that truth had teeth, and now it was biting back. Hayes stiffened when Elise pulled the metallic tag from her bag, the same one she'd hidden earlier. The shape fit perfectly into a small etched slot on the corner of the map, locking in with a soft click. Lines illuminated faintly under their flashlight, revealing new information layered beneath the original markings. Hayes exhaled sharply. This was no ordinary map. It was an encoded mission overlay. Tactics like these, "They've been used before," he whispered, face hardening. Elise looked up sharply. "By who?" Hayes hesitated, jaw clenching. "A private contractor. Black Zenith. They operate outside oversight." She felt a chill crawl down her spine. "You think they sabotaged us?" Hayes didn't answer, but the silence was confirmation enough. Coda sniffed a nearby crate, pawing until the lid shifted. Inside were sealed folders, dusty but intact. Elise reached in and froze. A photograph lay on top, grainy but unmistakable. A general shaking hands with a Black Zenith operative, handshake tense, secretive. Hayes inhaled sharply, the color draining from his face. "That's him," he whispered, "the man who recruited my brother." Elise's stomach twisted, grief and horror blending, until her hands shook uncontrollably. "They killed Seraphim to hide something," she said, barely able to form the words. "And they're doing it again." The truth settled on them like ash, suffocating, undeniable. A low growl vibrated through Coda's chest, deep enough to rattle the crates beside him. Elise snapped her head toward the tunnel entrance. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, approached. Hayes grabbed her arm, pulling her behind stacked equipment as flashlight beams cut through the darkness. "They're too quiet," Hayes whispered. "Not Navy. Mercenaries." Elise's breath trembled. "We're not being detained, we're being erased." Her voice cracked as the weight of it finally crushed whatever hope she'd held. "We were never meant to come home." Hayes placed a steadying hand on her back, but his pulse thundered beneath his skin. Coda bared his teeth, hackles rising. The footsteps stopped directly above them, the metal grates creaking under shifting weight. Elise's pulse thudded in her ears, each beat sharp as gunfire. Dust drifted down as someone leaned over the grate, scanning the darkness. A voice, cold and unfamiliar, spoke into a comm device with chilling clarity. "Found them." Hayes grabbed Elise's hand. Elise pulled Coda close. The voice finished, calm, as a verdict. "Orders are kill on sight." Branches whipped past Elise's face as she tore through the forest, Hayes and Coda closed behind. Rain hammered the canopy so hard it felt like pellets striking skin, each drop cold enough to sting. Mud clung to their boots, sucking at every step like the earth wanted to pull them under. Hayes slipped once, catching himself on a root slick with moss. Elise grabbed his arm without thinking. Their breath fogged in the icy air, every exhale a fleeting ghost in the darkness. Behind them, distant shouts faded, drowned by the storm, but the danger stayed sharp, relentless. Coda barked once, urging them forward, his paws kicking up mud as he limped determinedly. The forest pressed in around them, shadows shifting with every crack of thunder. Elise pushed on, ignoring the burn in her lungs. Survival was no longer instinct, it was obligation. They reached the ranger cabin near midnight, its outline barely visible through sheets of rain. Hayes shoved the door open, and Elise swept inside first, Coda trotting behind with a soft whine. The cabin was small wooden walls, a table, a cot, and the stale smell of damp leaves. Hayes dragged a dresser against the door, its legs screeching across the floorboards. Elise pushed a bookshelf to reinforce the window, nails bending under pressure. Coda circled once before lying near the entrance, ears perked, body tense. Lightning illuminated the room, revealing their soaked clothes and trembling hands. For a moment, they simply breathed alive, but barely. The storm howled like something hunting them. Elise wiped rain from her face, steeling herself for what mattered next. Hayes spread a worn map onto the table while Elise pulled out a pencil stub from a drawer. She sketched a winding path through the mountains, marking turns and landmarks with quick strokes. "There's a safe house here," she whispered, tapping an X near an old logging road. "More evidence, files my team hid before Seraphim fell." Hayes leaned back, rubbing his temples, tension radiating off him. "Elise, if we go after actual generals, we won't survive this," he said, voice cracking. "My career, my life, everything goes up in flames." Elise stared at the map, her throat tight. "Everything already burned," she whispered. Her hands shook, old memories clawing at the edges of her mind. Hayes saw the way she flinched at nothing. Trauma wasn't behind her, it was chasing her just as fiercely as the mercenaries were. She sank onto the cot, head in her hands, shoulders trembling. "I can't do this again," she whispered. "I'm so tired of surviving." Hayes sat beside her, unsure whether to reach out or stand back. Before he could decide, Coda nudged her hand with his nose, soft and insistent. Her fingers curled into his fur, grounding her like a lifeline. Hayes watched the moment, something settling in his chest. They weren't just fighting for answers, they were fighting for the dead. "For them," Hayes murmured. Elise lifted her head, eyes rimmed red but burning with purpose. "We finish what they died for," she said. And Hayes echoed it. "We finish it." She finally revealed the truth that had haunted her since the mission. Seraphim wasn't extraction, Elise said, voice brittle. "It was cleanup." Hayes frowned. "Cleanup of what?" "A massacre," she whispered. "Civilians. Ordered by officers who wanted it buried." Hayes froze, horror ripping through him. "That's why we were targeted. My team never came home." Thunder rumbled outside, but the silence between them was louder. Coda let out a low, uneasy growl, body stiffening as he stared at the door. Hayes moved to the window, lifting one corner of the curtain with caution. The whir of machinery cut through the storm, mechanical, rhythmic, terrifyingly close. A drone hovered just above the tree line, scanning. A beam of light swept across the cabin, pausing on the barricaded window. Hayes dropped the curtain. "They found us," he whispered. Elise grabbed her bag, adrenaline igniting every nerve. Coda backed up, teeth bared, fur bristling. Hayes reached for her shoulder but stopped when a faint, deadly glow appeared on the cabin wall. 3 small red dots, then 4, then 5. Elise's heart stopped. Snipers. The window lit up in a constellation of red. Gunfire shattered the night before Elise could shout a warning. Sniper rounds punched through the cabin windows, exploding glass into a storm of glittering shrapnel. Instinct overrode fear. She slammed into Hayes, knocking him flat just as a bullet tore through the wall where his head had been. The table splintered, the lamp burst into sparks, and Coda barked wildly, spinning toward the door. Smoke curled upward as the curtains caught fire, flames licking hungrily toward the beams. Hayes tried to rise, but Elise shoved him back down. "Move later, survive now," she hissed. The roof groaned under heat. They had seconds. Elise dragged Hayes toward the back door, shielding him with her body as another volley ripped through the burning cabin. The smoke grew thick, choking, turning the room into a fiery maze. Coda led the charge out the rear exit, paws skidding on wet ground as they burst into the storm. Behind them, the cabin ignited in a roar, flames reaching for the sky like a signal flare to every enemy in the forest. Hayes stumbled, coughing hard, but Elise yanked him upright. "Keep going," she shouted over the thunder. They sprinted into the tree line, swallowed by darkness and rain. The forest closed around them, branches clawing at their clothes as they ran. Elise moved ahead, faster than she should have been able to. Old instincts she'd buried long ago flooding back with terrifying clarity. She vaulted fallen logs, slid down muddy slopes, and scanned the terrain like she'd never left the battlefield. Hayes followed, breath ragged, slipping on slick stones as bullets smacked into trees behind them. A steep ravine forced them into a scramble. Elise descended effortlessly, Hayes crashing behind her. The forest wasn't an obstacle, it was a weapon, and she wielded it. A rustle to deliberate made Elise whip around. An operative lunged for Hayes from the shadows, blade glinting. But Coda came first. He slammed into the attacker with a snarl, teeth sinking into the man's arm. Hayes spun, kicked the operative in the knee, and Elise finished it with a branch snapped clean from a fallen tree. Another merc charged toward them, but Elise ducked, using a slick rock to pivot and drive her elbow into his throat. They fought like cornered animals, improvised weapons, terrain advantage, raw survival. One enemy tumbled down a slope. Hayes pinned him briefly as Elise hissed, "Who sent you?" The man choked out a single truth. "Your own leaders ordered this." They barely had time to react before gunfire rained again. Elise shoved Hayes aside, but a shard of metal ripped into her leg, hot and deep. Pain tore through her, nearly dropping her to the ground. Hayes caught her before she fell completely, wrapping an arm around her waist as her leg buckled. He carried her as far as he could, muscles trembling violently, knees giving way on soaked earth. "I've got you," he panted, even as he collapsed to both knees. Elise fought to stay conscious. Through blurred vision, Hayes lifted his head and froze. Headlights cut through the trees, bright and blinding. A vehicle rolling toward them, friend or enemy. The headlights blinded them for a moment, but then a familiar voice called out, calm, urgent, unmistakably human. Mara Lee, the underground investigative journalist known for exposing classified abuses, stepped from the vehicle with a camera already recording. She'd been tracking Operation Seraphim for years, following digital breadcrumbs no one else had noticed. Hayes staggered toward her, carrying Elise until his legs finally gave out. Mara's eyes whitened as she saw Elise's wound, but she didn't stop filming. "I knew it," she whispered. "They finally slipped." Then Elise collapsed onto the muddy forest floor. While Hayes tried to keep Elise conscious, Mara filmed everything with unflinching precision. The blood-stained map Elise had clung to, the classified document Hayes had pulled from his pocket, and the recorded confession from the operative they had forced into the open. She uploaded the footage in real time, setting it to push directly to her encrypted feeds. "This goes live now," she said, fingers flying across her device. Within minutes, the internet exploded. Comments, shares, duets, live stream reactions, millions of eyes hit the truth at once. Elise drifted in and out of consciousness as the world finally saw what she'd been dying to expose. Panic erupted inside military PR headquarters. Officials tried to suppress the leak, issuing takedown requests and scrambling press statements, but the footage spread faster than they could type. Citizen journalists saved it, mirrored it, reposted it across every platform. Protesters gathered outside bases and government buildings within hours. Calls flooded congressional offices demanding hearings. Oversight committees responded publicly, announcing emergency sessions. Retired officers stepped forward as allies' voices long silenced, finally choosing to speak. Operation Seraphim was no longer a rumor. It was a wildfire. Then the real fallout began. Private contractors tied to the program were arrested before dawn, escorted out in handcuffs to high-ranking generals or suspended pending investigation. A joint intelligence task force launched a full internal inquiry. As the news played from Mara's dashboard screen, Hayes froze at a name scrolling across the ticker: his brother. Classified files revealed he had tried to expose the same truth years ago. His accidental death during a training exercise hadn't been an accident at all. Hayes whispered, shaken to the core. He died trying to warn us. Elise finally forced herself upright, breath trembling, eyes wet with equal parts pain and relief. This wasn't my fault, she said, soft at first, then stronger. They used us, all of us. Coda rested his head gently on her lap, closing the symbolic circle of loyalty that had begun the moment she adopted him. Hayes wrapped an arm around her shoulders, grounding her. Moreau's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her face drained of color. A message displayed in chilling simplicity. There's one piece missing. Meet me alone. 3 months later, the world felt different, lighter, calmer, rebuilt in quiet ways that only survivors notice. Elise now lived in a small coastal town where the morning fog rolled gently over the training fields. She spent her days teaching young veterans crisis response skills, helping them rebuild confidence the way she had rebuilt her own. The ocean wind carried the sound of their laughter, a stark contrast to the silence that once haunted her. She no longer hid from leadership. Instead, she embraced it with steady purpose. The woman who once doubted her own worth now shaped the next generation of protectors. Hayes visited whenever his new schedule allowed. After the scandal broke open the military's deepest shadows, he had been recruited as a federal investigator tasked with dismantling the web of corruption exposed by Operation Seraphim. It was grueling, dangerous work, but he faced it with a fire he thought he'd lost long ago. Every successful takedown felt like a tribute to his brother. When he arrived at the coastal facility, he always brought updates: arrests made, cases opened, secrets no longer shielded by rank. Elise listened not as a soldier, but as someone who had finally reclaimed her place in the world. Kodo, fully healed, had become Elise's certified service dog, padding faithfully at her side during every training session. His presence symbolized new beginnings, loyalty made official, purpose redefined. The scandal had sparked national reform, oversight policies tightened, accountability strengthened. Elise watched these changes unfold with cautious hope. For once, the world was shifting toward justice rather than away from it. She carried herself differently now, back straight, steps sure, eyes unafraid to meet anyone's gaze. Her flaw had transformed into her strength. She trusted, delegated, and led without fear of abandonment. The training facility itself sat on land chosen with intention. At its center stood a memorial stone, etched with the names of her fallen team, a place Elise visited every morning before class. Flowers left by strangers and families lay gently at its base. She read letters from the families her team had saved on that final day, letting their gratitude seep into wounds she no longer pretended weren't there. Each word gave her a little more closure, a little more peace. Hayes often joined her at the memorial during his visits, saying nothing but standing close, an unspoken bond tying them together through shared survival. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the cliffs, Elise found a small package waiting on her doorstep. No sender, no note, just her name written in clean block letters. She opened it slowly, breath catching when she saw what lay inside. The original metallic tag, the same one that had unlocked the truth months earlier. But now, freshly engraved into its surface, were a set of unfamiliar coordinates. Elise stared at them, heart pounding. Another secret, another path, another beginning. And the story wasn't finished yet. The coordinates led Elise along a narrow path carved into the cliffside, the ocean roaring below, like a memory she could finally face without trembling. The sunset painted everything gold and fire, as if the sky itself understood this was the end of a long war inside her. At the final marker, a small cairn of stones, she knelt and brushed away sand until her fingers struck metal, a time capsule. Her breath hitched. Her original team had buried something here, something meant for a future they knew they might never see. With hands both steady and shaking, she opened the lid. Inside lay a single dog tag, a sun-faded photo of all of them smiling after training, and a folded note stained by time. Elise unfolded it carefully, recognizing the handwriting instantly. "If you're reading this, you survived for a reason." The words shattered the last wall she kept around her heart. She cried, not the silent, restrained tears of a soldier, but a deep, unfiltered release that emptied years of guilt and buried pain. Each tear was a name, a memory, a moment she could finally let go. For the first time, Grief felt like healing, not punishment. Kota sat beside her, pressing his warm weight against her leg as the wind whipped around them. Elise whispered a vow into the fading light. She would no longer live as a ghost of the past, but as a guardian of purpose. She pulled out the old mission map, now worn thin at the edges, and tore off the last corner still stained with blood. She let the wine take it. The scrap fluttered upward, then outward, then disappeared over the cliff as if the past itself had finally agreed to stop clinging to her. She breathed in slowly, steadily. She looked out at the horizon, where a single ray of sunlight pierced through the clouds and struck the ocean in a straight, shimmering line. It felt like a blessing, soft, wordless, spiritual. Not from doctrine, not from faith, but from survival. She placed the metallic tag gently on a flat rock, leaving it as a marker of closure, of truth faced and conquer. The ocean carried the sound of distant waves like applause meant only for her. The world around her held stillness and possibility, equal in measure. Then she stood, strong, balanced, grounded, no longer the woman who ran through shadows, but the warrior who had learned to walk in the open. The warrior who lived, the warrior who chose. She wiped her face, tucked the photo into her pocket, and stepped forward into the wind. No narration, no command, no certainty, just a silent question rising in the air around her. What truth are you afraid to face? And who could you become if you did? If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that surviving is not the end. It's the beginning.